Okay, we'll go ahead and get started here. Thanks everyone for coming out. My name is Ben Shelton. I'm project manager for CGIA, the Center for Geographic Information Analysis, and I'm the project manager for the statewide orthoimagery program. It's funded by the 911 board here in the state. And with me is
I'm John Derry. I'm the other guy.
John Derry is an analyst with CGIA. He plays a big role on this project, keeping things running, all the day-to-day stuff that we go through every project year. It's kind of like the mail, it never stops. We got to keep planning for the next one and keep the current one on track, so it's a team effort. Our current cycle is shown here in this map. You know, we're on a 4-year cycle. Back in 2012, probably a little before 2012, the Geographic Information Coordinating Council established a business plan for orthos that really recommended this 4-year cycle to keep things refreshed. Saw it as like a mission critical data set that 911 needs for emergency response, but also a lot of different uses, especially as the next gen 911 data is now being created from the orthos and everything. So it recommended this 4-year approach, and now we're in the 4th cycle of that, which is kind of crazy to say. So we've been doing it since 2012. This current cycle, though, has started in 2024. We're in the 2nd phase of that 4-year cycle in the green here, shown in the 26 counties of the eastern Piedmont. And then with a little forward look, we'll talk about what may be coming in 2026 and 2027, depending on funding, and get into a little bit of the program details. But it's a really foundational data set for a lot of the GIS work that goes on in the state, and we're pretty proud of it, and it's a big team effort. It's a big collaboration between many different state agencies, local county governments, the primary safety answering points, the 911 board. It's just a big group effort to kind of keep these projects going, make them successful, create the best products that we can. CGIA, we serve as the project manager. We kind of keep things on track, keep everybody on task. We have NCDOT photogrammetry plays a huge role for us because they do this type of work. They do photogrammetry, they do aerial imagery. So they do all the compliance monitoring, checking all of the deliverables from the contractors, making sure we have enough overlap in the images before they even start to orthomosaic it. All of the different nitty-gritty arrow triangulation, all the fancy words that photogrammetry uses, they know what those actually mean, and they actually keep those contractors honest and keep them on track. Then we have the geodetic survey within DPS, Department of Public Safety. They do all of our horizontal quality control. So they go out and they test and put out control and check all the imagery after the fact to make sure we're meeting the standards that the state standards really require of this imagery. So for every product that we produce, we use ASPRS standards for this resolution imagery, which requires a 1-foot accuracy in the RMSE in the X and the Y. So if anything falls outside that 1-foot threshold, the contractors have to go out and redo those tiles and redeliver them to us. Happens from time to time, but usually they're within that 1-foot spec. They're probably closer to half-foot spec most years. And then we have the Secretary of State's Land Records Management Office. They really administer the state standards. So the Secretary of State has adopted our ortho technical standards for the state, and they maintain that and make sure, and they're a participant in all of our projects going forward. So all of these, moving pieces in state agencies, we have MOUs and lots of agreements that we put in place to keep these, good working relationships in place. And this is kind of the current timeline for that 2025 project, those green counties that I showed in that last map. We went through a qualifications-based selection process. It's, really the state statutes dictate that this is a land surveying product. It has to go through these qualifications-based processes, which, look at qualifications without regard to cost. So once we qualify vendors, then we're able to negotiate costs and do scopes of work with them, and then really kind of get everything in place for that project year. And when we have just completed acquisition, March 2nd was our last flights, and John will talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. But I also wanted to highlight that we've kind of changed our QBS process. We used to do it every year where we would qualify vendors, go through that whole proposal evaluation. It took about 6 months, with state procurement and everything that we had to go through. Well, we worked with procurement, and we've kind of developed a change to the process where we're doing a 3-year pre-qualification, and after this cycle, we'll look at doing maybe a 4-year pre-qualification. So we have a set of vendors that are now qualified to do the work for the entire cycle, which really saves us time on the front end of each of these projects. but it really could pay dividends for county, local governments that are looking to pursue their own projects. We're working with procurement now to kind of change that pre-qualification into a convenience contract that county, local governments can use to do their own off-year projects, to do derived projects, or even buy-ups on our project years. You won't have to do your own QBS process. You can just issue scopes of work to our qualified vendors and kind of use it as a convenience contract for whatever you may need at a local level. We also have ideas to, potentially, a lot of the discussions of Helene, and this was not in place for Helene. It was kind of in process of getting in place. But, if, heaven forbid, this happens again, we'll have a resource that any state agency, county, or local government can use for kind of what they call gray skies flights. Go to those vendors, get capacity. After Helene, there was a lot of great imagery work. It paid a lot of dividends. It was done by DOT and NOAA and a lot of different groups. Well, if they need additional capacity, they could go to this list, if they have the funding, and get some extra planes in the air to get this stuff collected. Really help people get those damage assessments when they need it the most. So it's a good improvement I think we're really proud of. And so as we get more information, if you stay tuned to our NC1 map imagery page, we're going to be putting a lot more information about that convenience contract once procurement has all that documentation in place. But also at the same time, I'm working on getting that pre-qualified vendor list to submit some potential costs and budgets for certain products that may be pursued as part of that convenience contract. Many Brooks guidelines say we can't really request costs up front, but I can kind of generalize costs, aggregate them amongst all the vendors just for budgeting purposes. So we're sending this spreadsheet out to the vendors. We have sent it out. And we're looking for them to kind of give us pricing on different various product options. And then once we get those, we're going to kind of aggregate those costs for different geographic scales and then kind of put it out publicly just for your information only. I know a lot of county, local governments, they do like a 2-year budgeting cycle. Sometimes when we come around with our projects, it's kind of too late for you to get a budget in place to do any kind of buy-up or derived products. Well, with this kind of is just kind of doing your homework. Just, for your information, if you want to plan for the future, you know what you may need to budget for some of these products. So we're trying to get people information that might facilitate more products and more photogrammetry work through the state, and allow people to just kind of take advantage of this list without having to kind of jump through your own hoops and do your own QBS and things at a local level. You want to take it?
So this is the current status. The entire project area has been flown. Our contractors did a great job of getting everything in, pretty much in February. Few days in January and a few reflights in March, but they got the whole area in. Every cycle, or not every cycle, every year there is something that throws a wrench in it. And this year there were these military installations and weather. Weather is always an issue. So remember the snow we had in the northern part of this area and the cold weather, that kept some of those flights from happening. But it cleared up enough to be able to get in. There was also, wasn't there like a military exercise in Robeson County that slowed down collection also, and they were restricted. Again, our contractors did a great job of getting stuff in. So since 2012, we've been doing this online review application. A lot of you have probably seen this application. It started out as voice, and then it has now moved to this application that we call the data reviewer, but you still use voice?
I still call it voice.
Yeah, still call it voice. Anyhow, it allows the user, it allows you guys, the PSAPs and the counties to review the data to find inconsistencies in the data. So this is some of the stuff that you'll find. You find airplanes in the image. Our contractors do a great job of removing that stuff, so you have a clean image. And sometimes there is not safe for work sort of images, large graffiti that's on the ground that they also remove. So, which is a good thing. Yeah. These are other errors, tile errors that, misplacement that you'll find that it's also picked up during the review process. This is elevation errors. This is the kind of stuff that gets fixed with our imagery, but if you look at a lot of Google imagery and stuff that's out there, you'll see a lot of this. But we like to try to clean this up so it's a little nicer. Again, building warping. It's, again, elevation errors. Another reason why you need good elevation, updated elevation. Some of this stuff will happen regardless, like culverts sometimes will pull the imagery off, so. Yeah. So this is the end user quality review. July 21st is when it starts. So there are 3 areas that we'll do. You have 4 weeks to complete it. You know, Cumberland, Cumberland, Franklin, Granville, and whatever will be the first counties that will be online. Again, so the PSAPs and the counties have 25% of the area, and the state will take care of 30% of each county. So, you know, a good portion of the county is reviewed. A lot of things we try to not review is like forested areas, things like that. You know, we try to look at high-value areas, such as urban areas, a lot of road networks, stuff like that. We refined some of that, those inconsistencies.
And then some counties also review more than that 30%. You know, we have, 60% everything gets reviewed, but then there's extra, and some counties go even far and beyond and do that review for that extra piece to get to 100%. But
Yeah.
We try to look at all the infrastructure pieces and man-made structures. That's usually where the errors occur. So that's kind of where we put our focus.
So, as an agency, we are almost entirely in the cloud, and so is this project. So this is what this slide is just trying to express, is that, this is what we do. About 3 years ago or so, we moved entirely, from day-to-day basis, we're, on an EC2 instance as our workstation, and our database is all in the cloud. And so this project is almost entirely in the cloud. So starting from the upper left, the contractors will upload their data to a S3 bucket, and then we'll move that stuff to an EC2 instance where we'll process the imagery, do quality control, such as, you can't even read it here, but visual checks again. This is where we'll create the Mr. SIDS and create the mosaics that are delivered. Really the only time that the imagery is then pulled out is when it's put onto hard drives off a remote desktop, and that's the only time we actually out of the cloud. That data is also where you guys will access it, is on the cloud. That same data through NC OneMap, you'll be able to download the JPEGs, the mosaics, and whatever. It also gives us the ability to, if you want a custom mosaic of an area larger than your county, like a lot of the COGs will request an area, we'll create a mosaic for them, and they can download it from our S3 instance. So it makes moving of data a lot simpler, a lot easier.
And we also provide this imagery through the cloud to Esri. So if you see the world imagery base map through ArcGIS Pro, all of that, after our projects are done, we push it to Esri. They actually just received our 2024 imagery last month. So you'll start to see that imagery come online. We can't guarantee it's always going to be there. They might supersede it if they get newer imagery, but all of that's done through the cloud. We just give them access to our S3 bucket, and they're able to pull like the whole project down without us having to deliver on hard drives and things. So it's very, very easy nowadays. So this is just kind of a look at, since 2020, we started collecting what we call the fourth band, where it's color infrared. Color infrared was developed during World War II so that they could see like tanks in dense vegetation, because man-made structures reflect differently in the color infrared band. So what we've started to do is we provide all 4 bands. If anyone was interested in turning it on, most GIS software packages can turn it on. You can visualize. You can see where man-made structures really pop out from this imagery. But it also allows us to kind of look further ahead now that we've got multiple projects in the same area with color infrared. So we started in 2020 in the last cycle. We have now 2020 and 2024 on the coast. So really what that's enabling us to do is some more change detection routines and things like that. Because once you have that color infrared, it gives you that option to do that raster calculation with the fourth band to identify change. So we've been doing a lot of work in the cloud in our AWS environments to stand up some more object detection routines, change detection being one of them. We're looking at improving and incorporating image server, which would help not only just the regular image services on NC1 map, but also allow us to do this kind of change detection routines a little bit more, efficiently at a larger scale. But we also have worked with AWS as part of the broadband mapping efforts to develop a building footprint AI extraction to where, in a SageMaker instance in AWS, we're able to run these open source libraries and extract building footprints from 25 counties, and it takes us about 24 hours to run it. Whereas when we were running the Esri models, they have their own deep learning models. It was taking us like 14 days to run a model and like a couple weeks to also train a model. So it was really cumbersome to scale up.
There's some caveats in that too.
Some, yeah, because we aren't in like a real image server environment. Maybe that could improve the Esri models. But right now, because of the real push to get the broadband mapping some good, more up-to-date building footprints, we just needed speed and we needed it to happen fast. So that AWS, it's called Oversight ML, is a machine learning AI model built on top of a Meta Detectron 2 library that I never know enough about. But with that model, we're able to do these building footprints, and then we have ideas for other models we could stand up to extract things straight from the imagery, provide additional value on the back end coming from that imagery. But looking ahead again, we are looking ahead at 2026 and 2027 to finish out this cycle of projects. After we conclude 2025. Well, this summer, we're also looking at proposing the 2026 project area to the 911 board. We're in discussions to see if there's a need for some post-Helene imagery. There is currently a project out in the mountains that's collecting imagery for 2025 for damage assessment purposes. But if the 911 PSAPs require something that they can then create and update the next gen 911 data sets, we want to be able to provide that stuff. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about Helene.
I mean, there's my
you lived it, so I don't want to talk for
neighborhood
you.
in the bottom there. But, we're looking at different data sets and maybe trying to get an idea of what areas we want to cover extra for if that comes to pass. But again, the swath is you can see it in the imagery that's overlaid there. It's definitely, we're going to cover a lot of that area in the 2026, but there's, a handful of counties in the 2027 area that would probably like to be picked up. But yeah.
So we're just exploring options at this point, but we're interested if you have use cases of, you're responsible for developing those next-gen 911 data sets. Do you have a need for this imagery? If you have any use cases or needs, please bring them to us, and it will really inform us to make sure that we're making the best proposal possible to the 911 board later this spring, so that when we go to that 2026 area, we're capturing everything we need to be capturing. Do we need to extend it to the parts of the 2027 area to get that imagery out earlier, and those kind of things. So those are the considerations that we're exploring right now. We're looking at those options, and then we can put those in a proposal and try to get the funding in place for what we need. But we think that there may be a need for those counties, kind of where the damage assessments are extending down into that pink area in that 2027. And then I just want to point everybody to the REST services on NC1 Map and also our imagery page where you can check our project status. There should be more information about that convenience contract coming up soon out there, and then everything we go through, the delivery schedule, for the quality review and everything we'll try to communicate through this website, so keep an eye on that. And then I think that might be it. Yeah. So if there's any questions, I think we have a few minutes. Oh, yes, sir.
I have a couple of questions. First of all, you were saying that you've collected color infrared since 2020, but I know I've seen the 1998 ortho look like that too.
Oh yeah, for the statewide projects that are funded by the 911 board since 2012, the color infrared was from 2020 and beyond. But yeah, there were previous collections by the USGS and other organizations that were prior to our statewide program that did include that fourth band. They developed those the quad maps from those.
My other question is, out of curiosity, has snow ever appeared in any of the imagery?
Oh yes, there is snow. We try to limit that, to at least not impacting infrastructure, man-made, the roads and buildings and things like that. We had to delay flights this spring because of the snow in that northern part of the project area. We basically told the contractors to ground their planes for a couple days, let the snow melt. It just stayed cold for a long time after that, so it was kind of, persistent. I think most of the snow melt, we might still see some, like, where there's, like, coniferous tree stands, where the sun just doesn't hit on the north side, where there might be little white specks left because, they had to get those flights in, but I think it shouldn't be very minimal. Mhm. Yes, ma'am.
Outside of the orthoimagery, has there been interest with PSAPs or the 911 board on a statewide normalized routable centerline, street centerline data set? And if so, and maybe Darren could answer, like, if there's been any development or movement towards that?
Yeah.
Thinking of cross-jurisdictional calls for service.
Yeah, I think that's part of, the discussions when we're talking about next-gen 911 data sets. I'm not the most versed on the street center lines. I would direct you to Matt McLam. He's really versed in that next-gen 911 kind of work. So he might be able to talk more about that, but I could definitely see a need for, a statewide routable network because as Helene proved, the 911 centers need to be able to pick up the calls no matter if it's in their jurisdiction or not sometimes. And
And some PSAPs were down.
yeah, and down for a long
A lot of them
time.
were, yeah.
Yes, Jack.
So, so there are other vendors, a lot of the vendors that sell oblique imagery, they also provide orthogonal
Yeah.
imagery.
Mhm.
There's a few of those, and we contract with one of them. The question I get a lot at Henderson County is, what's the difference between this ortho set that was done outside of the state,
Yeah.
nothing to do with the state project, versus the state ortho?
So, okay, question is about the image service providers versus the statewide program. Well, it's a good question. I think the primary difference is open. Ours is an open data set that we can provide to anyone who may need it in the state. Every one of those image service providers is a licensed data set that they have a lot of restrictions upon. And we're not sure what the standards they're following, where we can control and make sure that we have a certain quality level, especially the horizontal accuracy if you're doing mapping off of it. If it's a service provider, they don't have to meet those standards. They are kind of,
Those are set by the state?
yes, and we are analyzing those products to make sure they're meeting those standards, whereas an image service provider may say they're getting a certain standard, but you don't have the North Carolina Geodetic Survey coming back and checking the horizontal accuracy to make sure they're meeting those standards. So I think that's a primary difference, especially when you're mapping data used for 911. You want to make sure that those products are as horizontally accurate as possible and as consistent. We have a very high level of consistency we do contract with multiple vendors, but we have a lot of compliance where we're making sure they're all matching the same standard and meeting those
And
requirements.
those vendors do a good job working with each other
Yeah.
to meet that.
So yeah, it's definitely a custom collection. Those service providers are different. A lot of those service providers don't have a North Carolina PLS, which honestly, you, by state law, have to have a North Carolina PLS to be providing those services, but nobody's enforcing those regulations, whereas all of our vendors have a North Carolina PLS, and they're signed and sealed and stamped products that verify the accuracy of what you're getting. Yes, sir.
This is fantastic, first of all.
Thanks.
Start guessing
The other guy.
I'm sorry about your neighborhood.
No, it's fine. It's gotten better. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm just gonna piggyback on the precision on the horizontal, especially in real estate. You mentioned that you were sometimes getting within half a foot.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a specific requirement for that horizontal precision versus the vertical?
Oh, for the vertical precision, yeah. Yeah, that's different. Yeah, horizontal precision is what we're really interested in. The vertical is not really part of the project. I think it's harder to come by. I think if we had a program where we're collecting LiDAR and the orthos in the same plane, but those technologies just aren't there yet because the sensors we use are the large format. They fly 12,000 feet. They collect huge areas very efficiently. The LiDAR ortho combo planes are kind of medium format. I think it's getting better, and maybe one day those two programs could be combined, and then the elevation and the horizontal and the vertical could all be tied into one program.
We're doing flood modeling using that imagery, but that happened to correct it.
Yeah, and use the LiDAR to, combine the elevation. Okay,
Right.
okay. Yeah, we can talk more. Oh, thank you. Yes, sir.
As a follow-up to that, has there been any discussion to align the LiDAR program and the ortho
Yes.
program?
So the Geographic Information Coordinating Council, just last year, we developed a LiDAR business plan. And that business plan recommends, they're closing out they're refreshing the LiDAR currently this year in the western third of the state. Due to Helene, they're using some disaster declaration stuff to fund that. Well, after they're complete with that we'll have QL1 across the board, across the whole state. And the goal is to find funding to come back and follow a year ahead of our ortho cycle. So in a perfect scenario, we're coming back to the coast in 28. They would fly the LiDAR on the coast in 27 so that we have good LiDAR that we can use in our ortho program. So if we could get some synergies there between the two programs, it would really benefit both to have that LiDAR flown 1 year ahead. And they'll follow our project areas instead of what they've been doing this 5-phase. They're going to try to adjust the LiDAR program to follow the 4-phase orthos. So yeah, that hopefully is coming soon. Did you have something?
The USGS is releasing the hydro radar program this year,
Mhm.
which is a little more
Okay,
high resolution hydrographic record.
that's nice. Okay, appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.